Good evening, dear guests and friends, and welcome to the Goethe Annual Lecture 2024. My name is Katharina von Rucktischel. I'm the director here at the Goethe-Institut, and it is my great honor and pleasure to welcome Professor Eyal Weizman as our guest speaker for this year. He will be speaking on the topic Unraveling Colonial Crimes in Namibia, Forensic Architecture in Germany. It is a tradition to invite distinguished speakers for this special event, and for my final time here as the director of the Goethe-Institut London, I unfortunately have to leave in end of February. I can think of no one more noteworthy to join us this evening. I'm particularly delighted that Eyal accepted our invitation, as I first met him about 13 years ago in Johannesburg, and had the privilege to following his presentation on various forensic architecture projects, which was then burgeoning field. I'm thrilled to have this privilege once again. Eyal is the founder and director of forensic architecture and a professor on spatial and visual cultures in Goldsmiths University of London. Many of you known him from his numerous publications, one of which he wrote together with his wife, Ines, also from the Architectural Guild, and which will be available for purchase after the lecture. I have to tell you, it's in German, so there will be an English and French translation, that's what I heard. But most of you will recognize him for his outspoken defense of justice in cases of abuse of power worldwide. Tonight he will discuss cases linked to Germany. The Goethe Annual Lecture, and previously the Brady Lecture, has always featured speakers from the UK cultural sector with special ties to Germany. It is also crucial for us that the lecture addresses issues central to our mission. Tonight we will hear about the Völkermord, the genocide of the Over-Herero and Nama by the German Schutztruppe, by the colonial army in Namibia, then Deutsch Südwest. Addressing our colonial past has been the Goethe's focus for many years now. So I'm very pleased to see actually Dan Hicks in the audience, who lectured here on restitution in 2019. We believe that we, the European colonizers, should confront our histories together to pave a way towards a common future with the formerly colonized countries. Eyal's approach is particularly impressive, using aesthetics and technological means to tackle these challenging questions. It is no wonder he is renowned not only for as a researcher and scientist, but also as an artist. But I will leave the details to himself, to Eyal. My role is to highlight his achievements. Among all the awards, I want to mention that he has been honored by an MBE for service to the architecture, that he is a life fellow of the British Academy, and that forensic architecture was recently awarded the Right Livelihood Prize 2024, better known as the Alternative Nobel Prize. After the lecture, I'm very delighted to welcome ARD's award-winning foreign correspondent and bureau chief, Annette Dittert, to moderate the Q&A. For the Germans here, she needs not be introduced. She is the face of Great Britain in German media. We are enormously grateful to her for sharing her keen interest and journalistic skills with us this evening. If you have any questions tonight, please wait until the Q&A. Let me end with thanking the Friends of the Goethe-Institut UK for supporting this annual lecture from this year on. And we are very grateful for this. And I also want to thank very much my colleagues who organized this, especially Francis, but also Maya and Christiane and Gerti, and our brilliant technician, Ho Yin. Finally, at about 7:45, around 7-ish. You are all invited to join us upstairs into our library for further conversation, drinks and light refreshment, and I hope that Eyal will hold on because he just arrived from New York, right? So still in different time mode. But without further ado, I hand over to you and wish us a nice evening. Thank you.
It's really such an honor, and I'm really delighted. Thank you, Katharina, for inviting me as the last Goethe speaker of your tenure, and I'm delighted to be speaking to Annette later. Really, I'm going to speak about our work in Namaka and Herero land. It's a collaboration that has begun with the establishment, with forensic architecture establishment of an office in Germany called Forensis back in 2020. At the invitation of another really great German NGO called ECCHR, the European Center for Constitutional and Human Rights, who invited us to Berlin, and we share an office with. We'll talk about what happened to the office maybe later. And the invitation to work with ECCHR was actually a larger invitation. It was really, we were entering into a very long-term collaboration, and ECCHR had with two really fabulous civil society organizations in Namibia. The Over-Herero Traditional Authority and the Nama Traditional Leader Association. And everything that you're going to see here is a collaborative work between those four groups. So sometimes you would see like forensic architecture type work, but the work is really together performed. And something that is very specific to know about forensic architecture, that we do not enter cases unless invited by the communities that actually undergo or experience state colonial violence, and really on their terms. And the reason that we were invited is because the NTLA and OTA consider the German colonial genocide of the Over-Herero and the Nama to be still denied. And when I say that, I'm actually quoting their perspective on that we have assumed ourselves, that accepting, though Germany says, the official German position is that they accept that genocide has taken place in today's term, in historical rather than legal term, that is equivalent to a denial, to a genocide denial. But without going into the history and to the whole legal debate and the negotiations about reparation and that are still ongoing, I would like to speak today about a material form of genocide denial. Material form of genocide denial operates not in a field of rhetorics, but in the fields of architecture, about what is the state of those sites that are so important for our understanding of German history, of the history of the Nama and Herero people, and that the state of those sites is in itself a form of genocide denial. Now, we need to know the basis of that story. I'm not really a historian, and I'm not going to give a long background, but following the 1884-85 Berlin Congress, Germany has received a kind of a protectorate status over the area that was then defined as Southwest Africa, that included Great Namaka and Over-Herero lands. That means a protectorate, as it is sound. And what has begun there is a settler colonial project that has very fast erupted into a genocide. And there is a big debate about when has the genocide begun. And it's also a debate between the Nama and Herero people themselves. The Nama position on that is that the genocide began in 1893 in a place called Nagas, that is today known as Honkans. And this is that place. This is the place we are talking about. In fact, here in that territory, something that is so important to understanding of our history, our shared history, and when I say our shared history, I mean the history of Germany, of the Nama and Over Herero people, but also the history of Jewish people, has began in that territory. In that territory, there was the Witbooi Nama, where had their kingdom, and that place was attacked in 1893. And as it was attacked, it was also renamed. And part of the genocidal campaign is one of renaming of the places that were taken. As you can see, there is very little, if any, remnants on the site. And it's also to do with the fact that indigenous architecture leaves very fragile and weak traces on the ground. When we were invited by the Nama Traditional Leader Association, they asked us whether together, and when I say together, I mean through oral tradition and through our technique and technologies, we could reconstruct both the kingdom itself and the genocidal battle that has taken place there. And that is this is the beginning of our story today. There is, in fact, one sign, if you go to that place, and it is an apartheid era. You know that Namibia was a colony of South Africa, was under the South African apartheid. And that monument, that sign, has been put there in the 1980s, and it includes extremely degrading language as it is described the Nama people. And it is accepted not as a memorial, but as an affront to the Nama, and it is sitting on a pile of stones. And that pile of stone was really the beginning of our investigation. It is really that those piles of stones where the Witbooi ruled with the council. There was there were two hard buildings on the site, and the reconstruction has been undertaken with our partners, an oral historian called Zach Dirsk, who has gone through that territory, who has collected oral traditions and have shared it with us, and we are trying to figure it out together, the stories that are going. So what is happening here, what you're going to see is really some still frames that I've grabbed from our video. I really encourage you all to go online and watch the full video, because I don't have the time to fully go into all the details. But we would really look at some moments within that investigation. But as part of forensic architecture's method, it's not only scientific, it is about undertaking a new form of conversation or interview that we call situated testimony, in which we're building together with survivors, whether they're survivors of a Syrian torture prison of several years ago, or of inherited testimonies, testimonies that are passing through oral tradition across the generation. The testimony is having a material basis in in spatial and architectural reconstruction. So together we are trying to build, and as we are building, recollection is assembled around the model. It is a way of entangling, intertwining evidence and testimony, right? The materiality and the speech, the stones, the model, and recollection together build up into a narrative. So the council and the church did not have a roof. The genocide began just as the church was being built, became an anchor, because we knew that is the only place that we knew where it was on the site. Through it, we began to look for where the village was. Particularly important was the understanding that the architecture, when you look at a lot of form of indigenous archaeology, the material remains are disintegrate after a short period of time. What here started the location process were actually areas where we knew the settlement was, that it had no stones on them. So it's almost like the surface of the territory had some patches like those or these where there were less stones. We knew from dirt that where the form of architecture that existed there was a building structured around a central pole. So this is really interesting. When you take a central pole out of the territory, that little hole that holds the pole receives a lot of dust and earth, and is slightly more fertile than everything that is around it, which is more stone. So very often you have actually a tree growing or a bush growing at the center of those structures. And this was also a way of understanding. And here he is speaking.
And you see that those made to put over a frame of wood, bent wood, by dome construction.
Did the entrance face a particular way?
Yeah, usually we had east-west. The doors also got names. They call it sorikans, meaning sunrise, and sorikans, meaning sunset. So the doors were east and west, two doors.
What you see here is actually a gaming engine. So, game designers have developed this technology that renders very fast and you can move through it. And we have reappropriated that technology as a mnemonic device, meaning as a way of materializing recollection and testing recollection vis-a-vis the landscape, etc. So because it's allowed for very fast transformation, because normal architectural technology, you need to build wireframes, it takes time to render. So gaming technologies are really structural to the work that we do. I'm not going to have time to go through it fully, but I want to take you through the way in which that which you see is not an act of representation. This is something that we call an operative model. This is not a model that represents post factum what is known. The model is itself a means to interrogate a particular territory. Again, it's a combination of translating oral tradition into form, but also interrogating the kind of the texture of the territory. And here together we are finding an area on the site that has almost kind of like a linear form of ruin, which we understand to be the wall around the settlement, and allowed to approximate the size. And then with those gaps between the kind of stones, those circles that are more clean of stones and have sometimes a tree within them, that is really where we speculate on the density and the location of the homes within that. So really what we have constructed is a speculative model that is as close as possible to what we know of the settlement. This was actually shocking to be in a place, the genocidal battle that happened there is 1893, and we were picking cartridges. And the cartridges that we were picking were both German munition and British munition. And we know that the guns that the Nama were using were coming from the Cape. They were using British guns. The Germans were obviously shooting German munitions. And that allowed us to actually locate them and some of the defense and the attack of that settlement, and reconstruct the direction from where people were coming. Now, the way in which that genocide has taken place is that Hendrik Witbooi, who was the king of the Witbooi Nama, has decided, in line with the traditional warfare that always spared women and children, when he saw the Germans coming, he assumed that they would not be massacred, that they would spare, and he retreated with his troops further, what you see here in blue. And instead, he did not understand the genocidal nature of settler colonialism. And in fact, the German Schutztruppen were massacring the women and children, and that remained within the settlement on there. There is one sketch that was actually drawn by one of the Schutztruppe, which we had difficulty in locating because there's a lot of imagination in it, let's say, and it is not precise, but it has given us, we saw in it both the hard structure, the location of the wall, etc. So Nagas is turning into Honkans, and Honkans becomes, after the genocide, part of the dispossession of the Nama, and it becomes state land. And on it, private farms are being built. Now, another thing that was very interesting to our partners is the way in which the dispossession and destruction of the Nama actually impacted the natural environment. And for them, the direct continuation, the material continuity, is not really within the remnants, as in the built remnants, the archaeological remnants, but the evidence for the genocide is in the transformation of the environment. And it was extremely important to actually try to map it. Now, the first aerial image that we had of that area is from 1967, it's South African military aerial image, and you see already a difference in the amount of bush, which is today you see actually more biological life, if you like. It seems to be more than what it was back in the 60s. And through all sort of computational models, we actually managed to reconstruct a speculative environment that went back another 50 years and then another 20 years. It was almost feeling like you're sending a satellite into the past. Satellite that takes satellite images. What would it look like if you would be able to send a satellite into the 19th century? And that is something that computationally it is done. But I want to explain maybe something that is incredibly important about this landscape. It's something that seems rather paradoxical. What is called bush encroachment is the expansion of very thorny bush that now anyone that has been to Namibia is experiencing, looking at it at the landscape. The bush is expanding, but bush is expanding on the expense of grasslands, and the grasslands is actually what held the more pastoral economy of the Herero particularly, but also of the Nama, and also allowed game to be there. So effectively, the encroachment of bush become a first step towards environmental destruction and desertification. And the arrival of the desert in our partners' understanding of the territory is something that is the curse of colonialism, right? So colonialism as climate change, as a transformation, and there are reasons to it which are to do with the damming and to do with the depletion of the water table that does not allow the grassland to compete against bush. So the expansion of bush is actually the material link. It's almost like the direct material sequence that leads from the moments of the destruction to today. When the bush scratches your skin, it is almost like the past directly is connected to what one is experiencing. So this is effectively the two types of landscapes that exist both in oral traditions and in the material calculation. The genocide has continued and erupted again between 1904 and 1908 with the Schutztruppen extermination order of the Over-Herero. And what the map here on the left would show is the way in which the genocide relates to land expropriation. So when we are talking about before the genocide, the amount of land under European possession is about 2% of the territory, and after the genocide, it is moving to about 20%. So it amplifies tenfold. The genocide is in fact an act of land grab and need to be understood as such. And indeed, a lot of the colonial troops, the Schutztruppen, were getting land concession and actually possess, until today, their families possess the land that of the people that they have murdered. There are, what you see here is another one of our techniques. This is an aerial, not an aerial, this is a photograph taken at the end of the 19th century of one part of Herero land. And we needed to understand, the grayscale of colonial photography actually hides both the grayscaleness of it and the resolution hides the grass. you need to actually read the grass back into the grain of the image. And in order to do that, you need to be able to turn the photograph into territory and then interrogate it as territory, as I'll show you again. Just a very few snippets of it, some by testimonies that actually kind of like read the grayscale of the image as grassland, and also through a process, again, of collective model building, in which the community would, this process of modeling is a kind of mnemonic device in which collective testimony by community members are actually building together. The model is responding to instructions by people as we're building environments as it is received through oral traditions. So this is one of the ways in which every tree is mapped. We use a lot the colonial photography, not to look so much at the object, but at the ground. You know, sometimes you have different scenes, but behind them there are always bushes and different type of grayscale, and you need to be able to read the environment back into it. And these are just a few snippets of that process of interpretation. The colonial archives, photographic archives that we go through, some of them in Windhoek in Namibia, some of them in Germany, some of them in Switzerland, are scattered amongst different places. The photographs are usually not correctly annotated in relation to place and time. It's not a very organized. You think sometimes about German archives to be extremely well organized. It's completely messy, and a lot of the time a lot of the research time we spend actually in looking and at relation between photograph, finding the same building or same location in different ones, establishing the time, re-annotating them, and then recaptioning them, meaning each photograph is captioned by those colonial photographers that have taken that and are showing things that are, some of them again using degrading language. We sit together with community members and we recaption those images. One of the first things that one has to do in order to recaption a photograph is to find the exact location where it was taken. Now, Namibia has extremely unique and very beautiful landscape feature, very unique geology. And the mountain is almost like a barcode by which you can, if you're able to build a 3D model of the landscape, you're able to find the exact location of the photograph, as you'd see here. So that photograph is located by the shape of the rock, and this one too. And one photograph pretend to capture the indigenous population as if it is a photograph of the way in which people lived, and if that is the life world. But you see it exists at the margins of another photograph of a German farm. So, in fact, the proximity between the images reveal a very different story than one of a kind of that is pretended by the location, and again the process of reconstruction allow also. So this is a memory reconstruction of one of the homesteads that fit also the the colonial era photograph, and that allowed us to establish that the German, the cemetery of the Schutztruppen in Waterberg, that place is Waterberg, it's actually one of the battles that began the genocidal campaign against the Ovaherero in the summer of 1904. The Germans are actually buried on a place where the homestead has stood, and has been erased. There is no memory. The only people who are commemorated in that place are the Germans genocidaires. So this is it's another example of a place where in the first one it is, there is either degrading commemoration. Here it's only commemorating the people the murderers effectively within this context. Again, I'll send you to our website to look at it. No place is as offensive as the place which is the heart of the genocide in Luderitz, a half island called Shark Island, a place that is today a tourist camp. So people can actually book and park their caravan and barbecue and have parties on a site that was the heart of the extermination. In fact, that place is considered to be the first death camp because the people that were brought there effectively they were brought to be murdered. 80% of the people that were in Shark Island perished. Again, there is no understanding of where the camp exactly was. We know that it was somewhere on that island, and here our attempt to work with oral traditions and photography required, again, a very detailed mapping of each and every rock on that island. The model became an anchor that allowed you to arrange the relation between those photographs and see how they are placed in space next to each other and reconstruct what has taken place. So it took a lot of time. Each one of those rocks we have built on the computer as a 3D object with great care and detail. That is, for us, the architecture of that camp. And each one of those rocks allowed us here, the rock number 1, to actually locate the exact position of the here the Ovaherero part of the camp. In this next to this rock, a rock again that connects the present and the past, and indeed when we are speaking to our partners, the way in which they would like to commemorate Shark Island is actually through those rocks. They do not want to build any museum on the place or put monument. It is the rocks themselves that tell the story of what happened next to them. And here, next to this rock, we see a Nama woman who is enslaved laborer who is working with an axe, breaking part of this rock. And when we went on site together, we have found the actual cut that she has made in the rock back in 1905. This is like the connection of the lived experience, the materiality, the form is captured in each one of those rocks. And that allowed a certain mapping or an understanding of where things were. Again, for the first time. There's great history written on the genocide. There's great, really inspiring German-speaking historians that are working on this issue, but the material work on the site had not been done. And that is exactly what allows genocide denial in the form of a tourist camp on effectively the bones of the heroes and heroines that have been lost in this place. And particularly something that is extremely disturbing is, and something that organizes our campaign right now, is that the port expansion, and this is the area that Namport, which is the Namibian Port Authority, seek to expand the port of Luderitz, which is otherwise here, onto the area where the camp was. And we have now submitted, together with a number of UN special rapporteurs, a kind of a direct complaint both to the government of Germany that effectively encourage and supports this development, because it is to do with the export of green hydrogen. I should say one thing about the site and about the means of destruction of people over there. The main cause of death on Shark Island was hypothermia. It was exposure to the winds. And the same wind that brought the colonizers to these shores, the same wind, and very particularly strong wind, that is responding to the geological singularity of Luderitz. And everyone that knows there know that the coast of Namibia, the Namib, is a dune area. Around Luderitz, there is a certain tectonic movement that pushed that rock, Shark Island, into the Atlantic. And that also creates wind turbulences that are extremely strong. And people could not survive the temperature and speed in which that wind is coming. This is actually what is being harvested now by European companies, including German companies, in producing green hydrogen. So Germany has difficulties in locating wind turbines within Germany, and has made an agreement with the government of Namibia, which is whose base is very different than the Nama and of Herrera, and in fact discriminate largely against them, to put wind turbine there and export the energy via hydrogen back into Germany, so Germany could meet its carbon offset. And that would require the expansion of the port in order to deliver all those wind turbines. You need a bigger port, which is actually in the area here in light red, which is completely invading Shark Island. Not only is it invading it physically, it is going to pollute the sound of that place. It's a place of great spiritual importance. The kind of things that we experience there with our partners, the kind of song that is delivered into that place, is a song that is mixed together with the wind. The singing and the wind create another, human, non-human kind of entangled form of commemorative performance that is going to be completely ruined with the hustle and bustle of a port. Not to mention that the place of burial of many of the people lost on Shark Island is the water. So the water is considered a gravesite that is now being desecrated by that. And all that is made possible also because of the physical state of all those places. We've also looked at one of the mass graves. Again, I don't have the time to go through it, but again, that was being located and discovered together in between situated testimonies and scientific work that allowed us to locate and confirm the place of mass burials of genocide victims. Again, a photograph like that, when you can locate it in the model, you know where the grave site is. So you work together between testimonies and this technique in order to establish these locations. Another site that we were looking at is Swakopmund, and a very different type of material investigation. And you would see that whereas on Shark Island in Waterberg, in Hornkrans, it was about interrogating the traces left in rocks and rock formation. Here, Swakopmund is an area of dunes. So the landscape continuously transforming. You don't have any anchor in that. Also, Swakopmund is a place in which the extermination of Namenov Herero people have been undertaken with the participation of a company, the Woman Company, that in fact it was almost like a company town. It was the company that was in charge of transport, but had many camps within Swakopmund, and one of those camps, the location of the main concentration camp in this town, was unknown, and it's partly unknown because the topography is shifting and the topography has buried it. So dunes are like slow waves in the sea. So whereas waves in the sea are in liquid, dunes are still they are also moving in the same way like waves. They're fluid. They're not liquid, but they're fluid in the sense that they move like slow waves and cover and everything in their midst. So we had to actually work together to interrogate the way in which the dunes are moving and the way that the evidence is actually buried by sand and wind blowing together. And here in particular, all the photographs of the concentration camp did not actually show the town. It did not show anything that had an anchor. And working together with our partners, the site of the concentration camp was actually lost to memory. This is one of the cemeteries that are connected to the genocidal campaign. You would know, because many of you speak German, that the word Lager is both storage and a camp. And going through the archive, we came across a lot of lagers. And in fact, there was a certain slippage between the two meanings of storage and camp. People were actually incarcerated in port storage facilities, and so all a lot of those locations we were able to map, but only the prisoner camp, as I said before, was actually lost. Its location was lost to memory, and one way in which we were able to locate it, we knew it's in the north part of the town, but the photographs toward the north do not actually show it. And for a long time, we were together wondering about that until we saw a kind of an earth disturbance, a sort of a dune in motion that allowed us to interrogate it. And looking at the back of those images, we noticed that kind of dune in the making, a wave just before breaking. and we understood that the concentration camp was put within the through of a wave, and we were able to locate the images in relation to that temporary motion of the sand in this location. And indeed, the camp was put there in order to be out of sight, while that is the case in. So I think that I'm sure, and of course that that area is been overbuilt and unmarked. So I think there is many more moments within the investigation. I think that you should, go to the website and take a look at those. A lot of the processes of reconstruction are actually undertaken as a form of performance. Here you have, this is the paramount chief of the Over Herrero, is in fact reconstructing the environment. And what I want to leave you with is the process by which working together between reappropriation of technological means and being tuned to inherited testimonies and oral traditions can actually not put those things as separate from each other, but actually one empowers the other and create a situation in which one can be tuned to the environment, to bushes, to shifting landscape, to rock formations as kind of testimonies that go across time. And obviously with the plea for those places to be for Germany to accept its responsibility, its historical responsibility. It's also a material responsibility. It's also a responsibility to place. It's also a responsibility to the environment. The way in which the negotiations have been undertaken has been between the German government and the Namibian government, excluding the affected communities and the representatives. And it is exactly the consequence is what you see. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Eyal. I'm just going to get this a bit closer. Can you hear me all? Oh, that's really a full audience. Good evening again from me. Thank you very much. That was actually not just enlightening for me. I must say, being a German, I knew about these things, but we haven't ever been taught at school about details and what exactly happened there. And actually, when I was listening to you, I thought that was fascinating, how little I know about this. And that is basically the proof of your work, that there is a lot of enlightenment still needed on many, many levels. Before we start to have our chat, just one housekeeping rule. We will talk about 10-15 minutes here, and then I will open our discussion to the floor. There will be roving microphones, so you just hold up your hand and then you'll get a microphone. Please do keep in mind that we don't have that much time, and please do ask real questions. And as Katarina mentioned already, we will have time to have a discussion over drinks very soon as well. So this is only sort of a starter to get you, get new questions rolling that we will then also be able to discuss later upstairs. First and foremost, I wanted to congratulate you to this wonderful prize you just received, the Right Livelihood Award, which is, as already explained, something like an alternative Nobel Prize. Just to put it sort of in proportion, I mean, that's a prize that was awarded to people like Edward Snowden, the whistleblower you might all know, or to the late Ken Saro-Wiwa, all people who have really been fighting for social justice against oppression and violation of humanity. And in a way a good company, and yeah, congratulations from me. This is a fantastic prize, and after all the prizes you had already, that's quite a big one, that also has made some waves. Do you remember when you first heard about it, what you thought?
Well, you know, I often say we prefer to win cases than win prizes. But actually, you know, if a prize that we were really feeling honored by is this one, particularly because some of our heroes have received it, like Ken Saro-Wiwa and others, and in a sense, it came at the right moment because we were just undergoing we had a very difficult year in forensic architecture, and somehow it came in the right time for us.
Is that helpful, a prize like that, or does that pile more pressure on you?
I don't know yet. It's too early to tell. Somehow, to tell you the truth, it's a prize that's very well known in Germany.
Yes.
And in Sweden, and that's about it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So
I heard about it
here. Nobody, right livelihood. I don't even know, you know, anyone that actually has heard about it. But it's particularly in Germany that we were facing the problem.
Yes.
So therefore, that was a good intervention.
Yeah, we'll come to that in a minute. I would just like to step back a little bit because, I mean, what you've been doing with this project is really something, as everybody could see in your lecture, absolutely fascinating, because forensic architecture is really a genuine new crossover project where you have made possible a collaboration between architects, data journalists, filmmakers, and as the European Research Council said, it was a scientific breakthrough that has revolutionized the way you can rebuild, as we have seen in your lecture, buildings from the past, which has a direct political impact as such as well, which you wanted. You started this in 2011 when the internet and the possibilities you would have in this massive ocean of facts wasn't as clear as today. How did this idea came to you first? Or how was this project born?
Interesting. Obviously, there's a lot of kind of origin stories now circulating, but one that is very clear is that obviously I'm an Israeli-born human rights defender, or the way that we call it now, Palestine liberation activist. And when I say, as a Jewish Israeli, Palestine liberation, I mean that the liberation of Palestine is our liberation also as Israeli Jews from a situation, from a reality of settler colonialism and apartheid. In Palestine, at that time, that's
where you started, no? Your work.
This is where we started. Palestine is understood to be a certain laboratory of weapons and technologies of oppression, but Palestine is also a place of enormous creativity in forms of resistance to it. And one of them was a collaboration between Palestinians and Israeli international architects in understanding the physical realities of the Israeli occupation, in mapping the architecture of it, in understanding that human rights violation, war crimes are not only produced by generals or politicians, they're produced by architects on a drawing board. And the understanding that human rights could be violated architecturally back in 2002 is the origin of forensic architecture. Then something happened. So we understood forensic architecture to be a form of, looking at the kind of the realities of war, like an archaeologist look at maybe more historical thing, though archaeology could be of the jungle and all sort of other more contemporary things, but to be an archaeologist of the present, if you like. But then something happened. In the early 20-teens, the internet and the combination between social media and handheld phones amplified the amount of photographs that were taken by witnesses, by people that were at the front line, not by professional photographers or photojournalists. And in fact, the trickle turned into a flood, and the flood needed to be navigated within. And we kind of fell upon that technique. We understood very early on that the only way to make sense of 12, 20, 700 videos of a single incident, of related incidents, is by building a 3D model and locating each one of those videos in space and time and navigating between them. Architecture became a way of seeing. Architecture became an optical device to interrogate media from. Yeah. And it's now became commonplace.
How it started. I mean, what I find so fascinating is that your work is, because it's so precise and so detailed and so painstakingly precise, has always again and again been used in courts. It has been used as judicial proof. Which is completely understandable after what you have shown us tonight. But it is also art. You show it also in galleries, in museums. Yeah. And sometimes when I was reading about forensic architecture and your history, I came across some kind of confused criticism. How can this kind of political activism be art? What would you say to these people?
So we tend to think about forensics and actually what we do is counter-forensics, meaning we only investigate police, army, secret services. We never take state commission. So we interrogate the interrogators, if you like. And in order to, when you are faced with a situation like that, not often you're invited, you're very welcomed in court. Particularly, you can imagine that in Israel, the objection, if they even see my name as an expert witness, they jump up with every petition I've signed, and and my sins are plenty, and so we also understand that counter-forensics need to bring evidence into the public domain. Forensis, which is the name of our German NGO, the Verein in Germany, forensis means in Latin the art of the forum, and forum did not mean the court necessarily. For the great orators of the first century, the forum was the public domain. How do you make evidence public? And then you use galleries.
So you would say to these critics that they have a totally outdated idea of art.
Either we are going back to kind of like first century concepts and try to mine it and to say, forensics need to leave the bureaucracy of the law. Although I'm an advisor in the International Criminal Court, and we're presenting our work in many international cases. But we are not naive about the limitations of the law, and we understand that evidence needs to be public if it is to be political.
So art, okay. So this is sort of also a different.
So we kind of hijacked the art infrastructure. At the time that we started, there was a lot of interest in politics and art and media, and we kind of rode that. And we're very opportunistic. We have something to achieve. We want to make something public. We want to advocate for something. We'll take the first opportunity. You'd put us in the media. We'll pretend that we're journalists. And then it was very useful to pretend that we are artists. It was so good at pretense that they even offered us the Turner Prize. Luckily, they didn't. They didn't offer. They kind of nominated us. So in a sense, it's. I like it not to be classifiable in a sense. We are in the art world, but we're not artists. We're in the law, but we're not exactly lawyers, etc. So
it's not clear boundaries
in nobody's hands.
Anyway, you said in one interview, I need to find that quote here in my scribbles, there is truth and beauty in facts when you get them right. Could you elaborate on that? I thought that was a beautiful sentence.
I think that there is a wrong conception of truth as if to fictionalize is to make something very complex, but the truth simply lies there. It simply exists to be picked up. And truth construction, meaning it almost sounds contradictory. If the truth is there, why does it need to be constructed? Why does it need creativity? Why does it need collaboration? Why does it need oral traditions and science coming together in a new form? Because effectively the truth needs to be, in order to be political, need to be performed in a particular way. And only then it can actually operate.
Yeah.
And it's just, it requires enormous amount of creativity to actually find the most basic, sometimes, of facts.
You said it's creativity. At the same time, it's detailed factual work. It's used in courts. You are an activist, you also said. So how can that be impartial research then? If it's completely clear that you have a political purpose and that you work for, let's say, the Nama or the Herero, how can people be sure that what you find is really the truth?
I think it's outdated. The concept of neutrality in relation to as a right to speak. As a right to speak truth is completely outdated. I think nobody that is not interested, politically committed, would go to the length that we go to in order to find the facts that we are. And in fact, when we present material there, very often I'm facing the legal team of an occupation forces. And they have their own, axe to grind. And in fact, if they want to confront our fact, they should be good enough to show where the mistake is, rather than to say that we are not objective.
Meaning you have a political purpose doesn't mean that your detail work isn't precise.
Yeah, having an axe to grind makes you sharper.
Exactly. That's a good way. Back to you personally. We've touched on that already. You're British Israeli, born in Haifa. Your parents just so escaped the Holocaust. They still live in Israel, as far as I know.
Yeah, they were born in a DP camp after the
okay.
war. Yeah, the family.
And yet you went to Germany when you were a young student. And in one interview I read, you said that was a difficult step to take, to go back to Germany. And at the same time, at that time, that was early on in your life, you had some deep respect for the way Germans came to terms with their history, especially regarding the Holocaust.
Yeah,
remember that?
Absolutely, yeah. So, my mother spoke to me in heavy German accent, but never in German. So I grew up speaking Hebrew in German accent without knowing. I knew a few songs, but I didn't.
That's funny.
And so I grew up in a family that wouldn't buy a German car, that was a mother that wouldn't like to go to Germany. Now I'm married to a wonderful German woman, and my mother bought a hat and a dress, and
really?
Came to Leipzig to our wedding. So I think it just took one look at Ines to melt her completely.
It's a bit difficult for the rest of the audience. We'll do that later.
Yeah. But
so the question is,
that the issue is really, how do you process historical and family trauma? And there is the big debate really amongst Israelis, and now that debate is becoming much bigger, is whether you understand it as a universal duty or whether it is a fight for survival. And for me, it was always to come from a family who's been decimated in the Holocaust was a duty, not a privilege.
Your attitude towards Germany has changed over the years. I mean, from this first encounter where you said you had deep respect for the Vergangenheitsbewältigung, you now see Germany and Germany's attitude towards Israel and what's happening in Gaza, particularly in Palestine, rather critical. You also you mentioned it at the very beginning, problems with your German sister office in Berlin, Forensis, that didn't get the funding this year as you expected it, for mostly public institutions who suddenly didn't come forward anymore, which has created a massive problem for that institution and a big budget hole. Why did that happen? What do you reckon?
So first, we opened the office in Germany. It's exactly like you said, Annette. We opened the office in Germany because we were committed to German civil society, and we had a lot of support in Germany. Not only ECCHR invited us, a kind of an invitation you cannot refuse. Here is a loft in the center of Kreuzberg, the operation budget. We were doing work continuously with German civil society groups, with the initiatives for Ujalo, with the initiative for Hana, with the initiative for that confronted the NSU complex. And we were feeling that we're doing service to German society. In fact, we don't go to Germany to do the work on Palestine. This I do from London with my Palestinian colleagues, and we have the expertise and connection. We are in Germany to do work with German civil society organization, and that is now being effectively defunded.
Yeah.
And it is defunded based on my pronouncement in support of decolonization in Palestine.
Yeah, you said in an interview, I just quote and explain that a bit more to the audience who are not that familiar with it. You said you criticized Germany because of that very openly, and said there's a fear to criticize Israel, even the now existing very national.
It's much worse than a fear to criticize.
Yeah.
I'm being accused of being anti-Semitic in Germany.
Wait a minute, Eyal. Let me just finish your quote. That's a quote from you.
Okay.
So you said there is a fear even to criticize Israelis and Jews who, as anti-Semitic, who challenge the government. There is I just say the German word for those who speak German, an Überwachungswut, a kind of manic surveillance with anger when it comes to the language. Even there, it's problematic.
Absolutely.
And you're not the only one who have criticized the German attitude towards Israel at the moment that way. Where do you think does that come from? Is that this awkward feeling of guilt that still plays such a big role, or is it some kind of complacency, or both? How do you explain that? I mean, you've lived through that the last year and have been directly affected by it. What is your explanation for this?
It's a complicated question to answer, but I see different vectors coming together, particularly the kind of transformation in German society, the fact that it became much more migrant-rich, has been enriched by migrants, many of them from Syria, from Palestine, from Lebanon, and obviously those migrants come with a different attitude than the German. Now the public mood shift against migrants from those places. At the beginning, there was a kind of 5 minutes of openness, and it becomes a stick to discipline non-white Germans. And it becomes a way in which Germany is kind of, in a very arrogant way, not listening, and a way of integrating, or a way of actually using, I think, a false understanding of Jewish safety by placing us, Jews who work in Germany, as the reason for anti-migration politics. Now, you tell me why should that make me safer to be put there? You see, for this guy's safety, we are now going to deport, deplatform, defund Germans or people who are not yet German national, but live and create and contribute to German society. And that effectively is a destruction, I think, of Jewish culture in Germany. The effect of that is horrific, because it creates a kind of a break, a cleavage between anti-Semitism and anti-racism. It's no longer the same thing. I remember Bubis always being at the front when there was when there were racist attacks in Germany, and today it is actually in opposition. No, if you defend, you defend against anti-Semitism by being racist, and that is an unacceptable I think, for liberal and left-wing Jews in Germany. It is making Jewish life in Germany precarious, and in fact, it is projecting on Jews an alignment with Israel and the Zionist project that was never asked by us to be that. In fact, think about the Jewish tradition in Germany. Majority of them, before the Second World War, were at least non-Zionists, if not anti-Zionists, liberals, left-wing, including also others, not only. But that is the tradition that is being destroyed right now.
Coming back to where we started tonight on that point, there is a German historian, Jürgen Zimmerer, who said that this is, he would probably agree with you there, but he also says the focus on the Holocaust is also in a way functions as a blanket that is sort of being pulled over the other racist and colonial history that has happened, like Namibia. So that sort of...
This is,
Would you agree there? I mean,
I'm not sure this is Zimmerer's position. I think his position is quite...
I mean,
there's a nuance there which is really interesting.
Yeah.
It is not a competition. There is no competition between acknowledging and accounting for German colonial crime and the Holocaust. Rather, they amplify each other. This is not about one should mask the other. In fact, the whole history of coming to terms with the genocide of the Nama and of Herero people is a way of actually understanding the origins of the extermination policy in the East. And not to mention, the categories like the Lebensraum, like Rassenschande, like racial laws, like extermination politics, like extermination with poison, etc., is actually being first exercised in those parts, and allow you actually a much more sensitive and nuanced way of also understanding the Holocaust. Not all of it, but a way of understanding it.
I think that was maybe now misunderstanding. What he means, and he wrote an article on that, is that he's quite critical of the German way of focusing solely on the Holocaust. And he says that is sort of a way of not having to confront Germany's past when it comes to other colonial racist events like the one. That's what he means, and that's what I was just about to ask. But I think,
I don't think that there is enough attention that you can give to the Holocaust. I think that the way you give attention to
that's what he meant,
through human rights, through understanding the colonial origins of the extermination of Jews in the East, particularly, it explains less the other form of extermination. The thing is that there is no... I don't think he said or should say, or we should say, that there's been too much dealing with the Holocaust. It's the way you deal and what you take from it, the way you think.
Wait, Eyal, I don't want to misrepresent. He didn't say there is too much. He just said the way of focusing solely on that is problematic. But this is something we could debate probably all evening, and I have promised that there will be questions, and there is microphones, and I would like to just have a quick break here and fulfill that promise. As I said before, be so kind and please do ask real questions so that Eyal can answer them, and we'll take about 5 to 7 questions maximum, and then we'll have our drinks and can continue our conversation up there.
Do you want to take a few and then do together?
Yeah, we can do that. Whatever you prefer. Would you prefer to do them one by one?
Let's take a few, no?
Okay, we'll take a few. Okay, so the gentleman over there.
Thank you first for a fascinating presentation. What I'd like to ask you, what were the circumstances that led the German government to seek a settlement with the Nama and Herero people, and how was an amount actually figured out? How was that settlement calculated?
Okay, we'll take the next question.
Hi, thank you again. I just had a question about, in terms of, you made a point about
in the early 20-teens, that there was a lot of more documentation going on, and that was kind of the basis for forensic architecture, using that those heavily documented incidents as evidence. In this case, where there's an absence, say, of any evidence, and that's probably the, in terms of a genocide, the motivation to remove and erase names of places, existing settlements. Do you find that that is an issue that you come up against when using forensic architecture and your work as a kind of basis for evidence and investigation?
Sorry, did I understand that rightly? So whether the renaming of these places and making it more difficult to find them?
Not necessarily, just a general, your work recreates things that are no longer existing, and when used in a sense of evidence, to not have any physical or tangible thing to look at, which is what you do create. But do you find that it undermines your work to not have anything physical?
Yeah, now I got it. Yeah, thank you. Sorry, next question. We take a third and then we'll answer them.
Okay. Thank you for your comments on the Holocaust. As a British Jew, I'm wondering if you've got any advice for British Jews who have misgivings about our proposed Holocaust memorial.
Okay, shall we start with the last question, Eyal?
I'm not sure actually what's happening with that. I'm sorry. I should inform myself before I would definitely dare give advice on those issues. I've myself designed a Holocaust memorial in Berlin, where is that? Axel Springer Straße now, no? It's a horrible name, no? But anyway, about the history of the settlement, again, I can tell you what I know, but I'm no expert, and it was a response to Namibian civil society groups that have raised that issue. The settlement has not been accepted by the communities, the affected communities. It is actually, they're being bypassed, and the negotiation is happening between governments, between the Namibian government and the German government. And the amount has been arrived between them, but it's actually nobody asked or consulted the representative of the affected communities. About the fact of absence, evidence always comes to fill some sort of absence. And violence is always a kind of a form of erasure. When witnesses are asked to reconstruct what is very often the worst moments of their lives, as they get close to the essence of the testimony, to the heart of the violent incident, there is a kind of a black hole of memory somehow erases those moments. So, you start reconstructing things always around a void. In fact, the idea of evidence is to approximate that void through multiple perspectives.
Okay. Thank you, Eyal. That's a very poetic way of describing that, I think. We have time for 3 more questions, and then, the lady, the gentleman over there can, and then here. And
thank you for a fascinating presentation. It made me, though, consider one thing which you mentioned, that you lost your funding in this present climate, whatever, in Berlin or in Germany. I wonder if you could comment on if there is a connection why a couple of days ago only, the Berlinale, which is one of the biggest international cultural events in Europe, just lost 2 million euros of its budget. And I wonder if that is in any way connected with the fact that this year's Golden Bear went to a documentary film about the restoration of the Benin statues. Zum Beispiel.
Okay, next question is over there, the gentleman, or I can hardly see you. Yeah.
Thanks. I wanted to pick up on this previous question about erasure. When you work with oral history, I was interested in how you process points where testimonies might be inconsistent and the approach of dealing with that alongside your approach to kind of a very fact-driven, data-driven method.
Okay, and the third question is... Yeah, okay, let's just start here, then we take one more in the back.
Thank you for your incredible work. I saw you at the European Cultural Foundation Award, and I wanted to talk a little bit about working in the cultural space, because I see more there are less and less artists and cultural activists who have the bravery and the courage and the commitment to work on social justice issues. And you are a teacher, you're in an education institution. So what can you do? What can all of us do who are working within the cultural field to try and encourage more artists to actually use their creativity and their skills actually to take on these issues?
Okay, I would say we answer these three questions and take then two more, as there's so much interest here. I'm just looking at the boss here. Is that allowed? We're a bit over the time. Okay, so you'll get your questions, but I think we should answer these three now, because otherwise it gets a bit too much.
Look,
Please.
I mean, we only need to ask Katharina, who would tell us there is a funding crisis in Germany anyway. So the platform is dropping, and then it's dropping in different speed depending on what you do. And so our organization has been unable to get the same level of support that we were receiving year on year since October 7th, particularly and in some occasion explicitly because of the work, not that the German organization is doing, but what forensic architecture is doing here. We're actually working on Benin. We are reconstructing the audience hall, hopefully a collaboration with Dan also for MOA. And so that's an exciting project. I don't know exactly, maybe somebody else knows more about the Golden Bear, and I'm not 100% sure about inconsistencies. Something I want to mention about there's a structural condition of testimony, and particularly testimonies of traumatic events. The error, if you like, the delta between the factual trace and the recollection of the factual trace is evidence in itself. Right? The error very often is a very manifestation of the trauma itself. So we, in various occasions, we are actually knowing that, you know, after reconstructing, I don't know, a Syrian prison, we know how long it is and where it is, but people mistake when they're being tortured, beaten, or experiencing harsh incidents, the mistake in the recollection is we are actually taking very, very careful notes of that, because that is evidence in its own right. So one of the people that one of the prisoners of a detention center, of the torture center in Syria, recalled being tortured in a round hole. Now we knew at that point that it was a straight corridor. So where is the roundness coming from? It is coming from a perception of total incarceration, of existing in an all-surrounded environment. So sometimes the errors and the inconsistencies are actually extremely valuable, and you need to be tuned to them rather than correct them always. And in relation to art and politics, I think there's a crisis now between artist and institutional cultural policy. I think that crisis is so big that I don't know if the cultural sector can survive and accommodate it. I do not know if documenta can still happen, because what artists want and where their ideas are and what they are aspiring to is so different than the conditions that are necessary to fund it, that something is broken, and actually let it break, and let's reinvent the cultural institutions that are actually a relic of Cold War liberalization, particularly in Germany, in the best sense of the word. And I think that the politics in which they has existed and gave rise to them was broken. There is now not so much the East-West axis that is interesting, but the North-South, the one that is dealing more with decolonization, and somehow the cultural infrastructure for that does not exist.
Thank you, Eyal. As promised, we take the last 3 questions in that corner, and then there was one there.
In regards to the Palestinian and the Israeli issue, what does your forensic architecture of the Temple Mount tell you?
Okay. Next question was, I think, somewhere over here, but there is another one there.
Thank you so much for your vital work and for this incredible presentation. I want to look just briefly at the second part of the title around forensic architecture in Germany. You've mentioned the funding challenges you have faced. It'd be good to hear a bit more about that and what the future of forensic architecture in Germany looks like to you. And then also, perhaps related to that, you mentioned that the work you do in Palestine has largely been out of the UK because the expertise is located here. But whether you feel that that kind of work, you could actually undertake that kind of work in Germany at this point. Thanks.
Okay, last question. There was no. We take one more. Okay, I don't see any more. Then we leave it with the 2.
Okay, thank you. In regards to the Temple Mount, very good question. I'm going to take you back to July 2000, the negotiation over the Camp David. In Camp David, the way in which the manic politics of separation that becomes the only imaginary in regards to Palestine is making more and more complex way of drawing borders and separation between Jews and Palestinians and everybody else that live in this space has kind of crashed in this location because, as you know, there has been a temple or 2 temples, and there is a mosque. And archaeologists actually claimed that that the level of the temple is actually something like half a meter under the pavement of Haram al-Sharif, which is the big piazza on top of the Temple Mount, and wanted to draw an international border under the paving stones of that place, so that Palestinians could own the surface and Jews would own the depth. And what it tells me, the forensic analysis of that, is that Palestine is a kind of, or that the Temple Mount is a kind of a microcosm of all of Palestine. If you want to divide it, if you want to continue the politics of separation, you'd always fail on the level of like minute material practicalities. That place needs to be kept as a single place in a single democratic space. It cannot take separation. It's too fragile to take separation, and I don't think it's democratic to have it separated. In relation to Palestine and work, I said in London, but effectively the work that we do in Palestine is undertaken by the Forensic Architecture Unit in Al-Haq. Al-Haq is the first and largest Palestinian human rights organization. It has been declared a terrorist organization back in 2022. And out by the Israeli Ministry of Defense, no other government, including the German government, accepted that, although Nancy Faeser wanted to, and there was in the negotiation finally it was not accepted. It's not the official position of the German government, but for Israel, and they're under Israeli occupation, our office there is being raided by the Israeli army, and is being raided as a terrorist organization. So terrorists of what? They are terrorized by the truth. Sometimes you think about terrorists as, you'd raid the terrorist organization, you'd find under the floor, you'd find some explosive or AK-47 or something like that. Here, they're just going through our files. What is terrorizing in our documentation of the facts of the violation in Palestine. I do not know.
And the second half of the question was, would that be possible to do that work from Germany at the moment?
I don't know. We don't have an organization anymore for work that we've done in London. So I think it is. But to be absolutely,
is Forensis still? I mean, you had to scale it back, but does it still exist, or
okay,
what is?
I have funding until January 2024. We do have support in Germany. We always had support in Germany. We have still the support of civil society organization. We have support of some people in the cultural sector. Just this week, there was a very big event that was organized by Forensic Architecture and the Over-Herero Traditional Authority and the NAMA. And in even the Humboldt Forum, it's not uniform in that way, but there are effectively people that the people that funded us until now are pulling the money and explicitly saying that that's a consequence of our politics in relation to Palestine. So the answer effectively is no, though I don't want to leave you with an impression that Germany has a unified politics on that. I mean, we still enjoy being there. We still have a lot of friends and comrades, and we want to be there, and we'll fight to keep it open in some way or another. Maybe a bit smaller, but we'll fight to keep it open. There's too many people that we work with, that there's still projects going on.
Last question from me. If you had one wish to someone from the German Cultural Ministry or whatever and had dinner with them, what would be what would be your wish?
180,000 euros.
That's a very short and precise answer. Eyal, I'm so glad you were here. That was a fantastic lecture, really impressive. I learned a lot. Thanks to a fantastic audience, your patience and your concentration and all your questions. I know we could have gone on for more hours tonight, but the show goes on upstairs. You're all invited, and I'm sure we can continue the conversation up there. Thank you very much.